And hopefully we gave everybody a chance to kind of connect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Peterson, and we are hosting today's First Friday event. Thank you so much wherever you are across the state of Michigan today. We appreciate you kind of tuning into this webinar to kind of discuss a very important topic. Again, Michigan Rehabilitation Services is offering this free seminar to, again, provide information in regards to some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we return to work or we're working. And one of the big things and big topics out there today is protecting identity and how that relates to employability. That's a major topic area, and has we've heard a lot of things in the news about security and keeping your identity protected. We've got some very special guests here today that can kind of help us talk a little bit about this particular topic. And again, just some of the areas that we want to try to cover today, how driving records affect securing employment, how personal identity breaches affect securing and maintaining employment, how blemishes in personal identity and driving records can affect promotions, what can be done to keep personal records safe at home and also at work, both. So it's a kind of a dual thing here. So we wanted to try to give you some tips and some good information today. And again, we have a couple of individuals on the line today. We want to thank Tom Jablonski. He's the owner of Cars Driving and Training, Sandusky and out of the Bay City area. So many years of experience with driver training, and also we've involved with CDLs and training in heavy trucks and so forth. Again, Mr. Jablonski, thank you for joining us. We'll be talking with him in just a little bit. I want to start with our first guest who's on the line, Special Agent from the FBI, Jason Chambers. And Jason is here in Flint, Michigan, where I'm located, and Tracy Lewis Jennings, who is also the district manager. I want to thank Tracy for us. We'll be facilitating today's presentation. And Jason, I'm going to kind of turn things over to you from a federal kind of level in regards to security and identity and protection. We're hearing so many things in the news these days about this particular topic. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Jason. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you mentioned, I do work for the FBI. I'm a special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been doing this now for 11 years. I originally grew up in Michigan. And when I joined the Bureau, they sent me to Boston for 5 years. And then I was able to transfer back to Detroit and then move my way up to Flint, kind of back to where I'm originally from. So it's really great to be here. I'm really excited to be able to talk to everybody today. And I was asked to discuss the security of personally identifying information and how that affects employment and other things in your life. And a good way to maybe get the topic started is to just touch on what is personal identifying information. And you'll see it abbreviated as PII, personally identifying information. These are things that everybody has. They're facts about you that differentiate you from everybody else. So things like your name, your date of birth, your social security number, driver's license number, even your phone number or email sometimes, address, things that are specific to you, pieces of information that are specific to you that differentiate you from everybody else. And as we're talking about getting into a new job or maintaining a new job and even getting a raise or getting promoted in work, keeping your personal identity secure is very important. And there's a couple of things there that I basically two areas I wanted to just touch on here on this topic. And one is how they're both two different ways on how that information can be compromised. One is through direct fraud, and one is through people taking it from you. But why is it important in the first place? And how can this affect you in getting work and maintaining work. Uh, what people do if when they get compromised personal information from somebody else, they will either try to take your money or start accounts in your name that aren't really yours, or mess up things like with your credit. You try to get a credit card in your name, but you don't know about it. Those kinds of things, and that makes it look like you're doing something that you're not doing. And that's not good. And employers, well, they might run a credit check or something like that, and they'll say, "Oh man, this guy's got all these other things going on. That doesn't look very good." But you're not doing it at all. Someone else is doing it and making it look like you were the one that was having some problems. So we don't want that to happen. So let's talk about how do we keep this information secure, and what's the best ways to go about this. Well, when I was preparing for this, I was looking into a couple of ways of how to talk about this. We get calls to the FBI all the time, and people, you can look up our phone number. It's right there in the Google machine, and we get people calling from the public all the time. One of the most frequent calls that we get is someone, or just a regular person, calling in and saying, "Hey, I got a phone call of someone pretending to be, the IRS. Those are the people that are in charge of taxes, and they told me that I had a bunch of taxes due and I owed a bunch of money, and if I didn't give them my information right away, they were going to come arrest me. And so I gave them my information, and they took $4,000, but now I don't think that was real, and I don't know what happened." And so what happens is there are people out there that are looking to actually take your money, and it's unfortunate, but it's true. And they will try to trick people into giving out their information when those people shouldn't give out their information. And a good rule of thumb is really, if someone's calling you on the phone, that would not be an appropriate time to give out your information, like your birthday or your social security number or any of those kinds of things. Like, that is not an appropriate setting to talk about that kind of information. The list of people who need to know that information is actually pretty small. The people that really need to know these numbers and these things would be the people you work for, your bosses. They probably have a human resource department, so that would be appropriate for them to have those kinds of numbers and paperwork, and then maybe some close family members. But that's about it. That's not the kind of thing that should be discussed over the phone or anything like that. So if you're getting people calling in or emailing or something like that, asking for your personally identifying information, it's probably not a good thing. It's probably you should probably ignore that. The other area where personally identifying information can get compromised is when we use information like that to make purchases, especially over the internet. And buying stuff online is such a great thing. It's very convenient. You can do a lot of really cool things and get it all shipped right to your door and everything. But it's important that you do that in with reputable companies. And places that we know and trust, things like Amazon and Walmart and some of these normal companies that we do business with all the time. That's fine. You can feel confident that your information is going to be safe there. But if you're going to a much smaller website, or something that might be less secure, it's probably a good idea to not give specific information to that website, and that would be things like your bank account number or something like that. And there are other ways that that are out there to help make online shopping safer. Using bank accounts with companies like PayPal, for example, is a good way to keep that information secure. So there are ways to approach that, but I think those are kind of the two big ways right now where your personal identifying information is can be compromised right there. And again, when we talk about employment and all that kind of stuff, one of the big things is responsibility, and employers are looking for people who are responsible. And when when your personal identifying information gets compromised, it can make it look like you are less responsible than you really are. And nobody wants that to happen. We want everybody's responsibility to be what it really is, and not look like what some criminal element is doing with your information. So I think that's what I'm going to say for now. Of course, I'll hang around for questions and everything else. But I think Mr. Jablonski's got some really interesting stuff to talk about as well. So I think I'll go ahead and pass that off, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason, very much. Very helpful tips and some guidelines for us to think about and follow. And again, we'll get maybe some question and answers in just a little bit towards the end of the presentation, because I'm sure our audience will have some. There is a tab down below, and it looks like maybe we might even have one in the tab, so we'll be checking that. But I ask for your patience on that. But we wanted to turn it over to Mr. Jablonski. He is, again, owner of Cars Driving and Training, many years of facilitating driver training for adults, young adults, and even those that are into truck driving. And so he's got quite an operation, has many years of experience. So we want to think about, Mr. Jablonski, how people can protect their driving record and the importance of that, and safety issues with that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Tom Jablonski from Cars Driving.
Hi, how you guys doing today? My name's Tom Jablonski. I'm up in Bay City, Michigan. I have a couple different driver's education companies. First one's called Michigan Driving School. It's basically the Tri-City area, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland. We also have another one out in the Thumb. It's called Cars Driver Training and Testing, where we have a road test site and driver's education for teenagers and adults. So the first thing I was going to talk about is how to get your driver's license. I know some of you participants, maybe 16 and 17-year-olds, and there's a different system for those 18 and over. And if you are considered a teenager, which is under the age of 18, you have to go through our process in Michigan is called the graduated licensing system, where you'd actually start out in a segment 1 course, which is basically usually a 3-week classroom session and 6 driving sessions. Once you complete this course, you'd be able to go to the Secretary of State's office, receive a level 1 learner's license, which would enable you to drive with your licensed parents. And that would take at least 6 months of driving with them. So the process in Michigan is not something that's easy or quick when you're under the age of 18, but something that's a good process and enables us to train young drivers properly so that they're safe drivers. Then we're also going to get into a little bit about the importance of having your driver's license and a good driver's record, so that you could, get jobs in the first place, and then hang on to and hopefully get promotions in the workplaces that you're working at. For adults to get a driver's license a little bit easier, you just get an appointment at Secretary of State's office. You'd receive a temporary instructional permit, which is something you'd have to drive on for 30 days with other licensed adults. And then everybody has to take a road test, which probably the one thing that is a little bit more difficult to pass, but it's a very important part of the process, making sure that people are safe drivers. But the whole process usually for teenagers, a little bit harder, longer process. For adults, a little easier and simpler. However, it's still something we have to go through in order to obtain and acquire our driver's license. It's something you need to hang on to once you get it. The importance of the driver's license itself for a workplace, for an employer to hire you, there's definitely a need for transportation. I don't know if your parents are going to drive you to work every day, maybe you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, but it's still the obstacle of not having, that transportation, the accessibility, and having a vehicle to drive with. Those are all very important attributes to employers who are looking to hire people. And I'll just use an example of my secretary's son, who was 18 years old, who we kind of helped out a little bit in receiving his driver's license, who was working at a big boy restaurant, which is a good job. He was washing dishes. This was recently in the last few months where we finally got him to take a road test and pass and get his driver's license. We got him a vehicle, and then he applied to a UPS, where he's now basically a packer for them, making $18 an hour. And those are type of jobs that are everywhere in the state of Michigan. Amazon, UPS, these type of jobs are out there where you need a driver's license. They really aren't interested in hiring people that don't have a driver's license. And a vehicle is a good thing to get as well. And the importance of having a job at a young age is something that you can hang on to. You need to have some type of a transcript of employment when you're applying for work. And as a young adult, it's easier to get jobs, and to maintain them. If you're 21 and you're working, it's a lot better than applying for a job and being 21 or 22 and have no job experience. Now your employers are wondering why you don't have any experience. What were you doing for the last 3 or 4 years? And having a license, just means that you're more stable as an individual and a person. You have that capabilities of achievement because you actually went through the process of getting a license. You're hanging on to your driver's license. Those are all things and attributes that employers, myself being an employer, are looking for, and other employers. Now, as far as how to hang on to your license, driving safely, not getting tickets, those are all important factors. Hopefully you don't lose your license. Once you do get in that situation where you've lost your driver's license, it is a little bit harder to get it back. And there's several ways, obtaining points, getting tickets, speeding tickets, those type of things would, once you get to a certain point, a level, if you get 12 points on your record, Secretary of State could take it away. Of course, you got drunk driving tickets, stuff like that, which stay on your record forever. Those are things that never come off. So once you would get a drunk driving ticket, that's something that, most of these tickets come off your record in 3 years. Where that type of a situation, it's something that employers can look back on pretty much forever and see that you had that type of a violation or situation on your record. So all these things, just having a driver's license, keeping a good driving record, no tickets, hanging on to a license, and then those are all good things that are going to make you a better employer. For an employer, just a better opportunity for them to hire you and know you're going to show up for work. You guys got anything else you want me to add into this?
Tom, thanks for those that information. I do think there's some very good information there. What I'm kind of hearing you say is when you have a driver's license, obviously it's a personal responsibility and to protect your good driving record, because what I'm hearing you say is that can really impact on my ability to get to and from work. It can impact my daily living situation. It can impact in a variety of ways, even for promotions. There are some professions that require driving or partial driving, and not to have that could really hurt someone.
Well, it's just with the reliability. We need people people working for them that are reliable and dependable. If you don't have a driver's license, you're kind of showing that you don't have that reliability. Why wouldn't you have a license? You want a job, you got to get back. There are bus transportation, there are other ways, but it just shows that effort of responsibility and achievement that you're doing things to better yourself and, be a better person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, if one doesn't have a driver's license, and hopefully you live near public transport or make some other arrangements, but obviously that makes it more challenging for someone to obtain and maintain employment. And we know sometimes there's situations where people are unable to drive for a variety of reasons, but if you have that opportunity, you want to protect it. That's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
That's correct. And that's the important thing too, is once you have that driver's license, make sure that you're doing things properly. Don't, speeding, running red lights when you could stop. Those are things that eventually will catch up to you. I myself did not have a great driver's record until I became a driver's ed instructor, which has been about 25 years now. And since then, I've never had a ticket. I did get pulled over one time and for driving. I was late for a meeting. I was driving a little fast, but I did not get a ticket. And the other part of this is when you have a good driver's record and you do get pulled over by the police, they run these things. They can see what you've done in the past. And if you don't have tickets on your record, it's a lot easier to talk your way out of these situations, to say that this was a one-time thing. I don't do this regularly. But if you have speeding tickets and other violations on your record, you can't talk your way out of something when they know you're lying to them. You got to be honest with them. That's the best way to be, is honest when you do get pulled over. They see your record basically before they even come up to your car. They know who you are. They know your past. So to be honest with them and professional, and if you haven't had any tickets, if you have an excuse, majority of the time, they'll let you get out of that situation.
Right. And in Michigan too, and most states too, you have a kind of a point system, and you don't want those on your record. If you do get a ticket, you want to take care of that, because those things can kind of haunt you down the road if you don't. So again, just another good point of thought there. Tracy Lewis Jennings, our district manager here in Eastern Michigan District. She's helping facilitate here. And I know we do have some questions in the chat. So if you are want to ask some questions, we have, again, both gentlemen still on the line. Jason Chambers from the FBI, and special agent here located in Flint, Michigan, and Mr. Jablonski, the driving instructor. So we've got experts here on the line that can kind of answer your questions. We do have one from Rachel. She asked, can credit checks stop this from happening? So I think she was wondering about problems that might be associated with things that get on a person's personal credit, and how often should you be checking your credit records, and how does one do that if you are unsure of how to do it, and is there a cost to that? So I guess I'm asking multiple questions here, but I think I'm trying to address it from a lot of different angles.
Sure. And actually, that is a really good way to kind of take control a little bit of your personal identifying information. Credit checks are a really good way to make sure that there's nothing else going on with your information that you're not doing yourself. So, because the idea is that someone's going to take your information and then use it to do something without your knowledge. And if you do a credit check, it'll show up that, hey, a new account was made with with all of your name, birth, date of birth, social security number, that kind of thing, out, in Nevada somewhere, and obviously that's not correct. And then you can start addressing those things. So it's a little bit easier to do this kind of thing now than it used to be. Most banks offer what they call credit monitoring as part of their services. And what that basically does is it does almost like a continual credit check for you. And then when a new account is of any sort is made with your information, they will send you an email or give you a call and say, hey, did you do this? And of course, if you didn't, then it's a great way to say, hey, I don't want that. Let's shut that down right now. And then we can address if there was something that went wrong. And then obviously, if it's totally legit, then it's all thumbs up and everybody's happy. There's other places like the one that comes to mind is Credit Karma. I'm sure there's other ones out there, maybe Experian. There are a couple of different other services out there that are basically free, and that will kind of keep track of both your credit score, but also other accounts that might be made with your information. So if you really, I wasn't sure how far to get down the line with some of these concepts, but I'm really glad that this was a really good question to start with. That's a really great way to kind of keep track of what's going on with your personal identifying information.
Yeah, Jason, and it's my understanding, I think, again, every so often there are free credit checks through those big credit bureaus. And so it probably is a good way to check once in a while. And there should be hopefully a no cost, and you just maybe doing it every so often would be
I can tell you, for me personally, I use Credit Karma on my, and so I have it on my phone. It's all set up, ready to go, and I can check my credit score basically whenever I want. And that, I think that's a really good way to do it.
I got another question too, because there's a lot of and I'll get back to the Q&A here in just a second. Just as a follow-up though, there's a lot of these fraud alerts that you can kind of set up on your phone. Do you recommend those kinds of things? Have you found that helpful for people?
Yeah, and a lot of that is that's gonna be the stuff that comes more from your bank directly, or your credit card company, either one. But basically what those do, they can see your normal spending habits. Like if you live in a certain town, most of your spending is kind of in this area of the country. If all of a sudden they see somebody buying a big screen TV out in Idaho, they're going to say, hey, did someone just use your account to buy something that you didn't want to buy? And I've gotten those calls before, and I've actually said, yeah, that wasn't me. Shut that down. And then they actually stop that purchase from happening. So it's you've lost no money in that situation. That's an ideal scenario. So that getting a good bank is another really good way to stay on track, on top of all of this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Kind of a follow-up question. I think this one probably be for Jason again. Says, Teresa asked, what is your opinion on the usage of Cash App, Zelle, is it Zemo? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but there's a number of those applications out there. I think that you can use to transfer monies, those kinds of things. I guess as far as security goes, I think that's kind of the question. How secure are these applications?
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the Cash App, or maybe Venmo, I think is one. PayPal is another one. I think you can actually do it also through Facebook now. Those are pretty secure. And the reason those are a little bit more secure than maybe some other websites is they don't actually give your information to the third party. They facilitate the transaction without giving the final person your personal information. And that's why a place like PayPal is a really kind of a useful tool when you're online shopping, because what PayPal does is PayPal says, okay, I know this person, I know Jason, I know Steve's got his bank information here, and he wants to buy something from Walmart. Walmart doesn't need to know Steve's information. They just need some money from Steve. So PayPal makes that money go where it needs to go without giving Walmart all of Steve's numbers and stuff. And so that's a good, that I like that. I think that's a better way to kind of keep your information with you. And the banks, this is the other thing from a legal perspective, the banks have a lot of responsibility to manage that information in a trusted and protected way. And so they are your personal security is very important to the banks, right? So you'd much rather deal with one of these banks like a PayPal or something like that than just, random guy running that website in Venezuela,
So I'm glad you mentioned that. What about Cash App though? Is that?
I believe Cash App works the same way. I'm not an expert on Cash App specifically, but I'm pretty sure it basically works the same way. They're kind of like the third party between the people involved. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. It does. It does.
Right.
See, we have another question.
We do. We have a question actually that I think Tom might be able to take here. This is in regards to driving. The question from Sydney asks, how long will the level 2 driver's license last? So that's a very specific question. How long will the level 2 driver's license last?
So your level 2 license actually would not expire until you turn 18. And at that time, you'd have to return to the Secretary of State's office. Actually, once you turn 18 with a level 2 license, it automatically turns into a full operator's license. The graduated license system would be over. So a level 2 license is something that it's like a transition between level 1, which you drive with your parents, and level 3, which you have full driving privileges. Level 2 license has restrictions. You have to be, there's a 10 o'clock curfew. You can only have one passenger in the vehicle, unless you have siblings, stuff like that. So once you turn 17, if you had your license for 12 months and you've had no violations or at-fault accidents, your level 2 license would turn into a level 3 license automatically, which is full driving privileges. If you turn 18, your level 2 license would automatically turn into a full operator's license.
Thank you, and a great question to ask. We have another question. I think this one goes to you, Jason. Person asks here, do private companies that claim to offer protection from identity theft work? I should say, let me rephrase it, because the question is, do they work? That's kind of the question. LifeLock is one that this person is thinking of, I guess. I'll repeat the question. Do private companies that claim to offer protection from identity theft work? Question mark. I think LifeLock is one of those.
Yes, and so the short answer is yes. And for most of those types of companies, you're paying a fee to them. And when we say, do they work or not? What I know, a big thing that they do is they monitor. They have a lot, they do a lot of checking and stuff to see if your information is out there floating around on the internet and that kind of thing. But also, I'm pretty sure, and it'd vary from company to company. But if something were to happen while you were, paying for protection from this company, LifeLock, among others, that company would take on some of the liability of whatever damage that you incurred. So it almost becomes more like an insurance policy from that perspective, which is fine. And hey, if you want to do that, that's great. You can totally do that. So I would say, again, the short answer is yes. It's just the more complete answer is you're never going to stop somebody completely from doing something bad. But there are ways to mitigate it and ways to try to handle it when it does happen. And I think that's kind of what these companies do here. At the very least, they're going to take care of you if something does happen.
Very good. Thank you for that information. We've got another follow-up, and again, it gets into the area of fraud and the incidence of it. The question is, they were just curious, is there a state that has the highest incident of fraud or identity theft? So I guess the question is, what's happening around the country and how does Michigan kind of compare in that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it's gotten a little bit more broad across the board with the advent of the internet and globalization and all that stuff. I don't know that there's necessarily a specific concentration in a geographic area that would be more concerning than others. I can tell you. So just to to illustrate the point, when I was working in Boston, I worked in a task force environment, which means we had people there from other agencies, not just the FBI, sitting all together working. And one of my partners there worked for the IRS, the tax people. And like I mentioned earlier, one way that people try to steal your information is they pretend to be the tax people, and they say, "Hey, you've got a problem. You need to give us this right now." Well, we were sitting there working, minding our own business one day, and he got a call on his desk phone. Wow. And he answers it, and it was some guy pretending to be the IRS saying that he needed to give him money. And he was calling an IRS desk phone. It was hilarious. He actually put it on speaker, and we listened to him go on and on for 15 minutes trying to pretend that he was the IRS. Wow. So I don't know that there's an actual concentration. I mean, they're calling the IRS specific itself pretending to be the IRS. The main thing is, don't fall for it if it happens to you.
Sure. Well, and we're going to follow up on another question real quickly with Jason, and then Tom, we've got one for you coming up as well. But kind of following about that, just the security of some of the accounts. There's so many different things out there, and obviously, I guess as we think about work, you hear about the terms phishing. I'm just thinking of that myself. And so if you're an employee somewhere, the importance of security, even not only in your home and your personal life, but how that can impact at work. One of the questions is, I think they were just looking at general Google accounts, how safe they are. We do get a lot of those kind of phishing things, though, that looks like it's coming from a particular, what you think is kind of a safe outlet, so to speak, and then it turns out that it's not. Is there some tips there that you can give about phishing and also the security as a whole in regards to people's personal accounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So phishing, the concept behind phishing is kind of what you just said. Somebody's pretending to be something that you trust and saying, "Hey, we need this information," and then you voluntarily give it, thinking that they are, again, somebody that you trust. When we talk about that in the context of work, a lot of times, what the kind of messages that you see will be things like, "Hey, this is Bob from the tech department, and we need your password to be able to, do a thing, blah, blah, blah." And then, what they're really trying to do is get your password to your email so then they can use that to do other things. That's what they're really trying. And hey, guess what? This is the stuff you see in the news, like famous people fall for that stuff. Like important people who should know better will do that, and then they get in big trouble, right? So what's the rule of thumb? If you're working wherever, and you get a message of something like that, just double check on it. If your company probably has an HR department, human resources department, or just your direct supervisor or your boss. You just go to your boss and say, "Hey, I got this email. Is this actually for real?" And if hopefully they can find out for you. At the very least, you're being responsible, and you're checking it out, and you're making sure that everything's fine. So normally that's kind of the immediate things. Hey, go to your boss or your human resources department, and then you can go from there to see if it was a legit message or not.
Thank you very much. Tom, we're going to turn it over to you. We got a couple of driving questions now. And I think this is just kind of a personal question, but there's a question here. The customer or person out there asked, "Do you feel people are judged in a negative light for not having a driver's license, even if they choose not to learn to drive?"
Well, there are people that choose not to drive. So, there is that situation. But when it comes to employers, you do need transportation to get back and forth to work. Now, some people take public transportation, or rely on other people to transport them back and forth. But there are certain jobs where you're only going to get that job if you have a driver's license. And basically that's where I was going with the licensing system. Is there's a lot of jobs now with all the packages that get delivered homes with Amazon. They're kind of taking over as far as home delivery goes with purchasing goods. And the box stores are kind of losing out on a lot of this because of the internet and people purchasing things online. So there's just a lot more jobs that would be available for people who do have driver's licenses. Not that it would be necessarily bad that but I think employers do kind of see that in a positive way, that you actually, went out and did something. But, if you weren't using your driver's license, I don't think it'd be, worth it to go get, you're not going to drive.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of a personal situation. In some circumstances, a person may not have that option. So anything we can do to help a person get to work, we problem solve. That's what our agency looks at, and helping with transportation in terms of trying to problem solve some of those things, and maybe utilizing public transportation or other options when available. But I think what Tom is kind of saying is there are a lot of employers out there, though, and especially with we're in a society now where we're getting packages delivered to homes and that kind of thing, and the food deliveries and this kind of stuff, especially during the advent of COVID and what we've experienced over the last year. I think for convenience sake and also safety sake, we've kind of relied on that very much. So there are opportunities, I think, as far as then going forward. So I think there is a lot of jobs that require the transportation. At the same time, we work with you no matter what your situation is, and we'll help you try to bridge the gap as far as transportation goes the best we can. We have some really good questions coming in. Another one for you, Tom. What are the fines for texting and driving, and does this stay on your license?
I don't believe it does stay on license. That is, I don't know what the fine is right now for texting and driving. I think that's something that Michigan is kind of a little bit behind on. I don't think our state enforces it as well as some other states. I can tell you that it is probably one of the stupidest, worst things you could ever do is try to drive down the road and use your cell phone. I've seen studies. The University of Utah has done a study on how much impaired you are as compared to if you're drinking alcohol, and what their data shows them. They did test drives with people that were drinking alcohol. They had a 0.16 blood alcohol content level, which is twice the alcohol impairment level. That was what was added or equivalent to what you'd be at if you were texting and driving. So if you ever seen people text and drive, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's either they're texting and driving or they're under the influence of some heavy narcotics or drugs, because they're all over the road. I mean, especially if people do it over and over and over again, they're just driving down the road texting. That happens to us, and some of our cars have more capabilities than others, where they have voice activated texting. I mean, those things are safer, but they're still not something that we should be using when we're driving. And again, Michigan doesn't have the enforcement levels that we probably should have that other states do.
And again, what I'm hearing too is it's state laws, so they have differences in different states. So, but obviously, it's been a very serious issue, and unfortunately, a lot of people have been hurt or damaged vehicles at the very minimum, let alone probably loss of life or hurting somebody. So, obviously, something that we need to be aware of and not be participating in. So again, very good question. I'm going to drop down one more, and then I'm going to come back to Jason, because we've got one more about vehicles. Again, if you do get a point on your license, how much impact is that potentially going to have on unemployment and having driving occupations, especially? So if you're in a driving occupation, you get a point. What can happen? That's a good question.
It's a very good question. So the point system, if you have a point on your, not a big issue. It's when you have multiple points on your record, and it affects your insurance rates as well. Insurance companies keep your record of how many points you, and what happens is your insurance gets to be affected, and you could lose your license if you get 12 points. Is when you have that situation where you could lose your license from the Secretary of State's office, and these stay on your record for years. So, if you're a safe driver, I mean, these are things that are going to benefit you in many ways, as far as financially, as far, with your insurance company, and it could go something that could go, as far as your employer looking into driving records. Some do that, and they could see what you're doing and how many points you have on your record. So the suggestion is don't get any points, but a minimum ticket with 1 or 2 points, it really doesn't affect you too much. It's when you have multiple tickets and multiple points.
Yeah, one other thing.
Is that over?
Go ahead, Tracy. Go right ahead.
No, I was just wondering. So when we talk about the points, is that over time? Is that how employers look at that?
They could. I mean, it's up to the employers to do these checks. And some of them, anyone who has employers that have driving, which is quite a few, you got store reps for, different type of merchandises and stuff. Those people, if you get a drunk driving ticket, you're not getting those jobs. I mean, those jobs are out. Even teachers in education and stuff, they're looking for people that don't have drunk driving tickets on their record, especially. I mean, those are things that will stay with you forever. The minor tickets, they will leave your record in 2 years. Even a speeding ticket, they start out at 2 points. I don't know if there's any 1-point tickets really, but so if you're going 5 over or less, you might get a 1 point. I'm not sure about that, but every 5 miles you go over again, you get another point. So 5 would be 2, 10 would be 3, 15 would be 4. Until you get into careless driving, reckless driving, which would be 4 and 6 point tickets.
Thank you.
Okay, this one is for Jason, I think. The question is, what would happen to a parent that opens a credit card in their adult child's name? Again, there's been some experiences apparently that some college students have found out that their parents opened several credit cards, but did not want any charges against the parent. So I guess that's a question. And how often is that happening, Jason? Or have you heard about that one before?
That's kind of a tough situation. And that's kind of the whole concept that we're talking about with personal identifying information. Normally, your close family members are people who would be responsible with that information. And it sounds like the situation you're describing would be a scenario where a close family member has been irresponsible with that information and has done things without the person's knowledge, and created accounts. Sounds like there's actually financial things going on here. Is that kind of is that correct there, Steve?
Well, from what I'm gathering from the question, it looks like that there's been some situations, and this actually might be coming from a counselor, because it appears that maybe they're working with some folks that have had this experience, and probably the college student didn't know about it. They're finding out about it, and then they're kind of stuck. And so,
sure,
I didn't know if there's any outlets. Maybe that's what we're kind of looking at.
Well, so there's probably a couple of angles there, and so it sounds like there's likely some negative credit impact for the student, or there's extra debt in the student's name that the student wasn't originally aware of, and that kind of thing. There are ways, and I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but there are ways to contact the credit bureaus. And I like Experian is one that I remember right off the top of my head, where you can contact them and say, hey, this was not done by me. This was done without my knowledge. can you take a look at this and take this off my record? And that, I mean, they're not just mindless machines. They will understand your situation and try to work with you. So that can be a possible option. Depending on the severity of the situation, unfortunately, that's the scenario where, like, you have civil court that might have to get involved. If we're talking like a lot of money, where the student, the victim in this situation, there's no way for them to get out of this situation. You might have to go like the civil court route, and that would be really unfortunate, but that might be what has to happen.
Thank you. Next question, and I think, again, Jason, this one might fall on you. And again, we won't get into the specifics in regards to the technical aspects. I think it'd be a little bit difficult but I'm going to add to this. The question is, how does the chip on our debit and credit cards work? Now, specifically, I don't know if we're going to get into all the details electronically, how that works, but I will say that's a good question in the sense too that there's been changes. Sometimes you swipe a card versus the ones that have the chip in it. How safe are those? And has there been problems with the chip? That's been something that I know they moved closer to. And is there any safety concerns with that?
So actually, there's some good news in that on that angle, and that question. It's a great question. So previously, those of us who have less hair than others remember this. Back when credit cards used to be, or bank cards used to literally be just a piece of plastic that had numbers on it. And basically, when you swiped your card in a machine at the grocery store, basically all that happened was the numbers that are on that card are transferred to the machine. The machine knows, okay, these are the numbers that are on that card, and they just process it that way. With the advent of the chips and then the little wireless sensors that are in the cards now, there's now a good way to describe it is like a digital footprint that is specific to that card, that's specific to you. And it's almost like a way for the companies to know that this is a legitimate card. This isn't a fake card that was made with your numbers. This is an actual real card because it's got the right account information and it has the right chip information. And so it can check, it's got two things to check, and it can say, yes, okay, these things match. This is a good card. This is a legitimate transaction. So that's actually, the chips and things are actually safer when we're talking about your personal identifying information. They're actually safer than the old ones that were just swipe and go. They're actually better now.
Right.
Thank you very much. Just another couple of questions in there. I certainly want to answer. I'm not sure the panel will, but I'm going to try to answer this one. It says, someone asked, any suggestions for work search or other than drivers in high demand to better fit for someone my age and experience or in non-experienced fields with minimal on-the-job training apply to that specific job? And I guess I'm going to respond to that individual is, if you are working with MRS or in local agencies, maybe work with your counselor in the discussion points with that, because hopefully we can kind of help you to kind of find some things and to look at some options for you, because that's certainly something that our agency does and tries to help look at and research employment opportunities. So, but I definitely wanted to answer that one. But again, I'm not sure the panel would be able to answer anything further than just, I think our agency as a whole potentially could help you with some of those things. Also, another one, if a person is in need of accommodations for driver's education and the driving test. So this is a really good question. And Tom, I think you can maybe talk about regards to the Secretary of State, because it looks like if a customer is in need of accommodations for driver's ed or a driving test, what are the steps that you recommend that they take to request those accommodations?
What type of accommodations are you looking for? I mean, they rent vehicles at the road test sites for people that don't have cars. So some of the road test sites actually have that accommodation for people that don't have vehicles. But as far as the driver's training costs, is that what the question is?
I think it's as a whole, just I think maybe just looking at it from a standpoint, maybe what kinds of accommodations are available through the Secretary of State. I think I can answer part of that. I know that if you request ahead of time, I think contacting them, and I know it's a little difficult right now because of the whole COVID situation and trying to get an appointment. I know they're working on those things in the state and the state secretary's offices, but the Secretary of State offices. But it's been my understanding over the years that you can kind of request to have a test read to you, for instance. Maybe that's an accommodation. And or if you have other requests, again, if you're working with our agency or other agencies or just the Secretary of State, I guess it's some planning, I think, would be a big part of that. You know, you can't really expect to show up at the Secretary of State's office without maybe having contacted them in advance a little bit to talk about the needs. But do you have any other suggestions or come across those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a big question, but
It is.
there is some fundings available as well for driver's education courses. Usually for local programs, like we have some high schools that provide some of the funding for the driver's education course. For a teenager, like the cost of driver's ed is over $350 now. And in Detroit area, I believe it might be more than that, depending on the area that you're in. You're looking between $350 and $500, $550, even maybe just to take a segment one course right now. So, and there is some available through some organizations, and there is some state funding for kids that would be in foster care. I know the state does provide funding for them. So anyone who's a foster child, the state through their care worker, they could get the funding for driver's ed. But that's the only one that I know is a state funded policy right now. The other ones are local.
One more question here, and I know we're getting be wrapping up for today's session. I want to thank, first of all, Tom and Jason so much for your attendance and answering these questions that have been excellent questions coming in from around the state. I want to thank again those that have been with us this afternoon, but I want to get to one other question here. And again, it's another security question. And I think, Jason, you can take this one. How can I find out if a minor or my children's social security number or identity has been breached?
That's a really good question. If they're still a minor, and I assume that you're the parent, you should be able to do a credit check on your kid. I think if I was concerned about that, that's how I would go about it. Let's maybe put it that way. And you have all that information. Also, it would be in the records that you are the guardian for this person. So you should have no problem in doing something like a credit check on your child's identity to make sure that everything is what it should be.
Excellent. One last question before we kind of wrap things up for today, and I think I can just probably sum this one up again. I think there was a question, I think probably the person may be interested in possibly doing a driving job, and the question really was just, are companies hiring adults? And again, we don't know how old the age of the person is here, but it sounds like it's a young adult with a clear driving record and capabilities. How to find a legitimate resource or application process is Amazon for hiring. And we are seeing, I think, a tendency across the board, as we discussed earlier, that there is some opportunities out there for driving. Obviously, having a clean driving record, being safe is most important, and being able to deliver those packages. And sometimes people have to have their own vehicles. Sometimes there's company vehicles. You see Amazon trucks going around, but I've also seen sometimes there's companies that hire for personal and use a personal vehicle. Oftentimes, if you're using one of those vans, one of the other things to think about, we talk about safety first and those things, but also when you're using company vehicles, you got to make sure too you're going from place to place and not stopping somewhere you shouldn't, because they track those vehicles sometimes. So again, an important another piece to kind of be thinking about, because we don't always think about that those companies actually, you're on their time, so you're going to be they could be tracked that way. So again, just another food for thought, so to speak, as we think about driving and employment and so forth. But there are opportunities out there to answer your question, and I think working with a counselor and or parent, guardian, those kinds of things. There's opportunities. Michigan Works is another opportunity to learn about some of the jobs. We work together with a lot of different agencies. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time and expertise this afternoon. I want to thank everybody in the audience for their great questions and for tuning in this afternoon on this webinar. Tracy, anything you'd like to add to close up here?
I just want to say thank you as well. This has been phenomenal. I also want to put a shout out for our own counselors who helped us get these wonderful speakers. Deb Carroll Smith brought Tom to us, and we want to say thank you so much, Tom. We've had the opportunity to speak over this time. It's been a great pleasure meeting and talking with you. And I want to thank Paul Hitch for getting us you, Jason, on today. So we just want to make sure we say thank you to everyone that has joined us. We also want to say that Michigan Rehabilitation Services can assist you with your career choices. And we hope that you see that we're really engaged in making sure you know everything that you need to know about getting employment and keeping employment. So with that, I want to say thank you, Steve, for facilitating on today. So thank you, everyone. And we ask that you stay tuned because we continue to have our First Friday events. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.